guys, it's May 15th, 2018, and this is your episode 145 of At Percussion. My name's Casey Cangelosi, and with me as usual are Megan Arns.
Hello.
And Laurel Black.
Hi.
And Ben Charles, how's it going?
Hi, everybody. Doing well.
Cool. Well, you guys, listen, our guest today is an adjunct instructor of percussion for the University of North Alabama, as well as adjunct instructor at the University of Montevallo. She's the percussion caption head for the DCI World Class Troopers Drum and Bugle Corps, and she's also a certified scuba diver and certified service dog trainer. So hello and welcome to Lauren Teel. How's it going?
Hi, thanks for having me, guys. It's going well because the weather is beautiful today, so
yay,
it's good.
Great. So I first learned about you when Tracy Wiggins suggested that we invite you on way back when. I don't know, one of those Tracy episodes long ago.
Yeah.
What's it like working with Tracy?
Tracy's great. He had me come out 2 years ago. And I was actually on my way to move-ins for troopers, and I got a phone call from him, and we kind of talked about the program, and everything he was saying fit with kind of how my philosophy is of teaching, and that it should all be very natural and effortless, and all about the sound first. And I think that we kind of realized right away that we were on the same page about that, and it just seemed like a very natural fit. And ever since then, I remember the first day I came into rehearsal, I got off tour with troopers and literally drove to Alabama and right into their marching band camp, and it was right away he was very welcoming, and I felt immediately like I was part of the team. I don't know if you guys have experienced this or not, but I've gone into places before where it's you kind of get in and you feel like you're an outsider, and you got to kind of build up that relationship with the people and start to feel like you're needed or wanted. But the second I got there with UNA, it was you're part of the team, you're in, you're very welcomed. And I totally appreciated that about that first experience. And it's been that ever since. Tracy is it's like a fountain he's like a walking encyclopedia. That's how it feels to me. I could ask him about any percussion ensemble piece or solo, and he won't know Google, nothing like that. He's spouting out the information. And I've learned a lot just from, working with him and being in that program. And I really appreciate getting that chance and, working with that studio. So it's great,
That's really nice and everything, but what kind of dirt do you have on Tracy?
Oh my God. Well, we've got this problem. We don't talk about it. It's kind of secret, but the air conditioning at UNA is so cold all the time. He's always just cranking it to 60 degrees. It's miserable. I moved from India. I was living in Indiana, and I moved to Alabama because of the heat. I wanted to be warmer, and it's kind of terrible. A lot of that's a hostile work environment there.
Yeah.
I saw you guys posting about this on Facebook, and there was a battle. Lauren's in the office, she turns it up. Tracy's in the office, he turns it down. Lauren's in the office, she turns it up.
Yeah, I'm just subtly trying to say, maybe it's time I get an office next door. I could put my instruments and solve everything. Everyone win-win. But no, he's great. He's got a very family-esque vibe about him, very genuine when he, teaches. And I respect that. And that makes me want to work there. You find those programs where the people you're working with, you're like, okay, great. This is a good fit. Because, I've moved a lot in my time, and I've worked at programs where maybe I was challenged a little bit more to figure out how to work in that environment. But with Tracy, it's been pretty smooth sailing,
That's awesome. So, yeah. How do you guys divide the duties? I know you work with the drumline a bit in the marching season, and you teach some lessons as well.
Yeah, so he teaches the upper lessons basically, and I teach the freshmen and some of the sophomores. And then I actually have my own freshman studio class that I do on Wednesdays when they don't have their full departmental with all the instruments. And then we have 3 percussion ensembles. We have the top one, which Tracy runs, the percussion players, and then the percussion ensemble, which is my group, which this year was mostly freshmen. And then the percussion orchestra, which is typically ran by a grad student, and Tracy kind of oversees it. And then we also have a steel band, which I'm hoping in the future to get in there with. I did a lot of steel band in my undergrad, and I would love to revisit those roots, And then obviously the drumline, that was probably the thing that got my foot in the door, at least the conversation started with UNA, was the drumline thing. And I think it's cool what we do there. It's that we take a very active role in the drumline, and we make sure that it fits under the umbrella of what we're teaching everywhere. And, you know, it's not just like, well, the drum line's its own separate thing taught by a TA or taught by someone outside. It's me and Tracy teaching it to make sure that what we're teaching them there fits in with what we're teaching it. You know what I mean? It's all the same, and there's not a difference between what we're asking them to do in regards to the types of sounds and things in percussion ensemble versus what we're doing at the marching band. And it's just more hours that we get to be around them and basically teaching them how we want them to produce these sounds and things. So yeah, it's again, that's like one of the things I like. It's totally unrelated, but I like animals, as you could see by that Facebook page. And I do some volunteering sometimes, and I've gone to places where I volunteer and I feel totally unneeded. And it's like, well, why am I going to put the time in here? And there's other places you go and they have lots for you to do and they want you to be involved and active. And I would much rather be at a place like that where I feel that my time is needed. You know what I mean? I don't want to go somewhere where it's like, well, thanks for being here, but we don't need you to be here. Sure. And that's the thing I feel UNA is they've given me a lot to do, and I like that. So
cool.
Yeah.
And you're split between, it was Montevallo and you?
Yeah. So I actually live in Birmingham right now, which is kind of the middle of Alabama. And 40 minutes south of there is a smaller program called University of Montevallo. And I'm the only percussion teacher there. I just started this past fall. There's three students that I was teaching this last year. Two of them were majors. One was a freshman and one was a fifth year performance major that was on her way out. Yeah, so big disparity there. But I think this next year there are 3 majors coming in, which is, you know, it'd be good to see that program grow. And that, you know, that's a different experience for me getting to see, you know, I've got UNA where it's a little bit more of established and bigger program, and then Montevallo that is quite a bit smaller and at a different, you know, point in its growth. So I get to kind of see both worlds and see what that's like, and I appreciate it. So I split my time between them. And then when I'm not at those 2 schools during the week, I teach for a guy named Brad Palmer. It's called Double Stop. And basically they go into all the area high schools and middle schools and teach percussion classes, teach like the specialists. So it's not like I'm at one high school and it's just me building that, but it's a team of us. It's me and a guy named Aaron Locklear. Megan, you might know him. He just finished his master's at Eastman.
Yep, I know him.
Brad Palmer. And my friend Hav, we all teach for him and, you know, go into the different schools. So that's a little bit different too. You know, I got a performance degree and never taught middle school and elementary age school until I moved to Alabama. And that was my first experience of it. That was last year. And that was a whole different thing. So my days literally go from 6th grade all the way up to like, I'm teaching students that are literally older than me, you know, teaching them percussion lessons. So it's good. But the thing that I find surprising is how many things and themes I see across that spectrum of ages. And I learned things from teaching 6th graders that I can take to my university or I can take to the drum corps. And it helps me grow, I feel, as a teacher and educator, just being in all those different places. And then when I'm not doing those things, I go on the weekends, I get my fill of the drum, I go to Troopers or, for some reason, I like driving, and I drive to Indiana once a month to work with Center Grove's front ensemble for the indoor, which I never did indoor when I was eligible or whatnot. So this was like my first experience with indoor was with this school, but I really appreciate the way that Josh Torres, he's a UNT alum, runs that program and creates a very communal sense on the staff, you know, and it goes back to when you find a staff that you get along with, you want to keep working there and keep cultivating that. And so I spend a lot of time in the car. That's what I'm trying to say.
Yeah. Lauren, how do you feel teaching WGI without having experienced it? Because I found myself in a similar situation a couple of years ago. And it's interesting. I feel like there are probably a lot of people in that situation because WGI has just exploded in even just the past 5 years, definitely 10 years, but 5 years. And it wasn't such a huge thing for sure when I was marching DCI. And it seemed impossible to fit that into my life when I was a percussion major. And now people are doing it all over the country, and hundreds of people are doing it all over the country. And so it is possible. And there, of course, have been adjustments that have had to be made. And I know some students also take a semester off. But anyway, my question for you is, what is some advice that you would have for someone maybe who is a great teacher and didn't have WGI experience but wants to teach an indoor line?
Well, okay, that's a big question there.
I know, sorry.
I think I never really went into it thinking like, okay, I've never taught a WGI line, so I don't I don't feel comfortable teaching it. I kind of just went into it approaching it. Okay, I'm teaching a group of students, and I guess what I'm trying to say is I see all of my teaching experiences with the one goal of let's get them to play with the best sound possible. Like that's what I'm trying to do. So I didn't change necessarily what I did with the Center Grove kids. And honestly, working there and seeing the level that those kids could get to at a high school, like they're doing things that I couldn't have dreamed of doing in high school. You know what I mean? Like I consider impossible. Even some of the skills and the sounds that they're making, the conversations we have, like I would have been hard pressed to have had with some of my kids at Troopers back in 2013, my first year there. So I don't necessarily think I would think of it as, well, I have had experience, so I can't do this. I think I would approach it more as like, what do I value, and how can I bring that to fit into this idiom? And I think you're talking about a lot of kids are doing it. I think that's an important aspect, is that drum corps and WGI and those activities, I think there's a responsibility as educators, especially in the academic world, to be involved in that, because it is such a popular thing right now. And I think it would be a mistake to not involve ourselves in that and interject and make sure that the things that are being taught are in alignment with what we're teaching on the academic side, and make those things more marriage together, because they reach such a wide variety of kids. I mean, because of doing the indoor thing, I have students now that are now involved in Troopers and are now at the University of North Alabama from Indiana because of teaching there. And it was a natural progression for that student to go from the things we were talking about there and take them to this university where the same things were talked about. So I think that's an important side of it, that I think that as the activity grows and becomes more, involved with music majors, that there should be more academic teachers involved in that to make sure that it's all in alignment and it could be more for good,
I object.
Oh, okay. Well,
because
okay.
It's hard to march with your left foot first when your bass drum goes on beat 1 and 3 and the left foot's 2 and 4. It's backwards.
Did you march in the high school marching band on bass drum, Casey?
No, when you played drum set, though.
Oh, yeah, but did you march?
No, I didn't march till college, and it was really hard for me to. I'm totally kidding, by the way. I don't object, but it was really hard for me. Like I had good hands, were fine, but marching was weird. It's like, what? Left foot is first? That's backwards. Right foot is first. Drum set has always been right. Anyway, not important.
Yeah,
Ben, what do you got there?
So Lauren actually largely just answered the question that I was going to ask, but I'll ask her to expand a little bit more. So I guess I can just go ahead and not be vague about this. When I was teaching at FAU in South Florida, there's a WGI group called Strike, and many years ago, Strike was basically hosted at FAU. Like they would rehearse there and all, but they weren't actually associated with the university. So when the band director came in, he effectively kicked them out and was very adamantly against this, and then basically said, it's a waste of time. They're depleting our resources for no gain for the university. And I was not in a position where I could argue with him, but I think Lauren sort of hit the nail on the head with, it's so, if people are interested in this and it's a way to get them in the door on your university, it can be a very mutually beneficial relationship. I think, though, the problem was, and I will give him to his credit, he saw this problem. A lot of students will get so involved in it, and so I think Megan even mentioned take a semester off from school to do it or something like that, that it can be counterproductive if it's not, done with a deft hand. So, Lauren, you've already answered the first half of my question, which is, why should universities be involved in this? But second of all, I guess what I'm asking is what's the limit for students, or where does it go from being practical to actually interfering and not enhancing other things?
Wow. That is a loaded question right there, Ben. I think that the student and really the teacher should be involved in the decision a little bit, but I think you have to decide what you value and look at what each ensemble individually is offering and what is it the ensemble values, because, and I'm not trying to sound negative or anything, but I know there are some ensembles competitively, they value the visual aspect more because that's historically right now what's going on, and that's what's getting rewarded. So you've got to kind of look at, I think as a teacher, if your student's interested, look at what's being taught and valued, and if the kid's really interested in it, maybe if you find a better way to say it, it's like if you find a lot of your students are going to one place, like let's say they were all going to strike percussion, maybe find a way to get involved also and help educate or learn from what they're doing too, and gain things from that. But I think it's dangerous to discourage kids from doing something, because I think it does become a little bit of like university versus this activity, and it creates a divide. And I think it's out of fear from their thing not being, promoted or hyped enough, or whatever you want to say. But I think that the more that those two can merge together and we don't draw such a hard line, the better it'll be for the kid. Because you have to be realistic. You can't do everything. You cannot do everything. But I don't think that doing the marching activity is necessarily a negative thing. It can't be the only thing they do. But from my own experience, the marching activity is what's opened so many doors for me. That's what has gotten me the opportunities to travel abroad. And Megan, that's how I met you at the India thing. I would have done that as if I had not done drum corps with Paul, and Paul would have, not to offer that to me and my friend Kaylee.
Lauren and I went to India together, for the record. I think we've talked about this on the podcast before. I think with Amy, I think it was the Amy Garapick episode. If anyone wants the story, she's been on the podcast. Yeah.
Yeah. So I do think there's a balance. I don't think that it can be all drum corps and indoor, and I certainly don't advocate for dropping out of school to just do one thing. But I don't think it's healthy to discourage kids from doing something if they're very passionate and they have the love for that. Because that's like what makes true like talent, right? Is like you have that passion and that desire to want something. That's gonna, more than any other thing, that's gonna drive a kid to get to that next level. You can hear it in their playing when they're truly in love with what they're doing. And I think I heard a podcast one time driving to the beach from Malcolm Gladwell. He was talking about how he believes there's no such thing as talent. It's just like being in love with something. And at first you're like, okay, what do you mean in love? Like, and he was like, like you're in love with like a boy or a girl, you become obsessed with it and you can't stop thinking about it, right? And he said the kids that he brought up a example of a kid that was in love with hockey at like the age of 2. All I could think about was hockey, and they would play videos of hockey and the kid would watch it and the game would end and the kid would burst into tears because the thought of hockey being done and over was so traumatizing to the kid. That was all he could think about. So by the time he got to 5, he had spent so many hours just thinking about the sport of hockey, never having played it. But when he got to actually play at the age of 5, he was considered talented. But it wasn't that he had some like magical dust over him. It was that he had the passion for it and spent so many hours thinking about it. That's all he spent that time doing, that he had already gained some insight into it subconsciously. And I think the same thing can be said about percussion. If they find something that speaks to them and it's going to make them want to play more, I think that's a positive thing. If they're spending time on their instrument and they're practicing it and they love it, we should encourage that. We just need to find a way to make sure that the things that are being encouraged and taught are in alignment with everything. And I think that's why it's so dangerous to draw such a hard line of like, well, blanket statement, I don't like WGI, or blanket statement, academia is just stuck. You know what I mean? Like, that's dangerous. It should be all, as we get more mature with each activity, be melded into one, I think. And that's ultimately the best thing, because that inspires that passion and can translate to other things, you know?
Mm-hmm.
We talked about Anders Ericsson on the podcast before, which is who Malcolm Gladwell's information comes from, is like his research. And we talked about, I forgot her name, but the woman who's taken that research one step further, and she calls this the grit. If you like that kid has the grit for hockey. Yeah, which is also the passion. What do you? Oh, and also I wanted to say real quick that Brian Bloom will be next week's guest. We got to remind him. You guys got to remind me to ask him about his story with DCI and Tony Cerrone, because Tony Cerrone, he told me, was very anti DCI at first, and then Brian Bloom has this nice story that it kind of, I don't know, a great meeting of the two sides. Sorry, but Laurel, I think you have something.
Yeah, mine was in reference to, wanting to be on the same page with students when they go off to do WGI or DCI, whatever it is. And how would you navigate, Lauren? Sometimes those groups are going to totally be in line with your philosophies and how you want to teach. And then sometimes it's going to be evident by when students come back hurt that those philosophies don't match. And so how have you had to navigate that before? And what would you suggest someone do in that situation as a teacher?
All right. My answer to this may be a little bit controversial, and I'm sorry if it happens that way, but
I object.
I think that it is our jobs as students, teachers, to give them reasons and answers for why we're doing something, right? Like if I'm going to ask a kid to do, I always tell my kids that the reason that you do anything should be because it's sound. The answer should be because it sounds good, right? So I think it's our responsibility as teachers to train the students what to value. And so that when they go out into the world and they experience those things, that they have been trained to value those things. And hopefully if they're put in a situation where they think they're getting injured, they won't want to be a part, you know what I mean? They don't want to be a part of something that will injure them. Right. I don't know if that's like a mean answer or whatnot, but that's how I feel about it, is that ideally, as we're doing our jobs, we should train them to value those things and value playing in a way that doesn't injure you. Like, can you imagine, like, if you're a cellist and you played in a way that, like, injured you permanently and then sidelined your career? Like, that would seem absurd. And I think that as educators across the board, both, you know, even people within WGI, no one should be okay with that. And that should become like a universal thing, that why would anyone be okay with that? And then if you are a student, your teachers have programmed you to think so much about like the sound and it not injuring you, and they know why they do things a certain way. They're not just doing it because, well, someone told me to do it this way, but because this is how I get the sound, or this is what, you know, is good for me, that they wouldn't accept that. You know what I mean? I know as like a student, this sounds awful, but I was snobby and auditioning for different universities. And I remember going to one in particular, and I remember them talking about doing something, and I had been taught differently. And I remember asking, well, why do you want us to do it that way? And maybe a little bit in a cocky way, because I was, you know, I thought I knew everything as senior in high school. But they gave an answer that was like, well, that's how we've always done it. And to me, that was like a no. That was a no game. My teachers prior to that had always taught me to understand why we were doing something, and to ask and question why we're doing something, not in a like rude way, but just so I understand. And I think that the more we understand, the more people won't want to do something that injures them or hurts them. And that's the best thing I think we can do. And then aside from being involved in it, also to make sure that those things aren't being taught. I don't know if that answers your question or not, but that's kind of how I feel about it.
No, it does. It's like a way to, to approach it from the ground up, from where you are, just to make sure that what you talk about as you teach, are the big things.
Yeah. Well, yeah. I mean, I tell all of my students this, even in high school, like, I ever ask you to do something, if you don't know why I'm asking you to do this, I want you to ask me, and I want you to make me explain it to you and defend it to you. And if I can't explain it, then we don't need to be doing it, because I think that's the danger that can happen in the activity sometimes, is that it's just like we've always done it this way. We've always done it this way. Mm-hmm. That's just, there should be reasoning behind it. And I think if we train our students, especially as music majors, to not accept that, but to know exactly why we're doing it, then that becomes not a problem. And then we won't have, not that I'm saying that I think there are a lot of groups out there that have really matured and come a long ways from that. I don't think that it's as prevalent, I would like to think, playing in a way that is aggressive, because of the sound systems, and the mallets have gotten lighter, and they don't need to be these like 10-pound mallets and stuff like that. So a little bit too, I think, is just like the perception out there too, a little bit. So I don't know.
Right foot should go first.
Yes.
Be the change.
That's backwards. We don't do that. That's how we've always done it.
Exactly. Yeah. It teaches us drum set better to do first. And you said that?
Yeah. Sort of wrap up, and I think the problem that band director ran into were completely invested in this extracurricular activity at the expense of being in school. Yeah. And I think that it was like a knee-jerk reaction to go so far the other direction. And I think that, like, based on everything Lawrence said about how, like, it can enhance and it can use the same techniques and all this sort of thing, I really think that it just makes me think of like, you can give 100% to your WGI group and 100% to school. Like, I don't think that has to be mutually exclusive. You might have to sacrifice somewhere else, like going out partying on weekends or something. But yeah, and I think like a great, even smaller scale analogy than that, we were kind of talking before we started recording about like students, have to pass math class if they want to get a degree in music, whether you like it or not. And that's pretty much the case at every non-conservatory university in the U.S. You have to pass math or science or whatever. And again, like that doesn't mean you have to give less to music, but you have to get through that if you want to get your diploma in whatever you're getting it in. So, yeah, I think that's a good way of putting it. Thanks.
I think it's weird to hold their hand too much. Is tell them you can't tell them what they can and can't do in the summer. You know what I mean? It's like, yeah. I think it's weird when directors tell them like, don't do DCI. It's like, yeah, it's too like simple. It's like, what? No, dude, don't. What do you mean? You.
No, and I know great people that have done it, and I know like great people that haven't done it. Like I think Colin Hill is a great example of someone that did it and has been highly successful. And I don't really think he does a whole lot with that anymore. But great player, great teacher. And then there are people like, I think pretty much, I guess not Megan, but Casey, Laurel, and I haven't done it, and I think have done just fine too.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, I have to say I don't know successful percussionists that have done it and have any regrets about it. I don't know any, and there's so many.
Or Brian Zader's another one. Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. Yeah, like everyone always talks positively about it. And of course, the percussionists we know today are the ones who, stayed successful, stayed in it, and end up are doing it for a career now. And yeah, they always seem to talk very positively about it. Yeah. Well, speaking of, I have a little sound prepared for you guys today. It's not hard to tell what the sound is itself, so I guess I'll call it Name That Tune, because it's a piece. It's going to be pretty obvious what you're hearing. So if you happen to know this tune, I'll be impressed. Okay, that's it. So aside from being just like tasty beats, what was that?
Is that me?
Was it you? No. Do you know that? Do you know that piece?
No, it sounds like a Pratt.
Oh, okay, yeah, pretty close. It is
or
definitely
Wilcoxon, yeah.
Maybe.
It is definitely a snare drum solo in the rudimental style, but I'd be surprised if any of you have heard of Richard E. Rogers Jr., composer.
No.
Or a little snare drum solo called Flamboyant.
No.
I know, isn't that a cute little clever title? Awesome. It is pun totally intended. So, well, no, that was yours truly just playing that earlier today, and that was the first 8 bars, just the theme, and it's a piece written by Richard E. Rogers Jr. in 1982, and I chose to share this today kind of in the spirit of Ben's topic, because I was looking for information on this composer just a month or two ago, because I started doing this piece with my students, and I couldn't find anything, and I even asked Facebook. I said, does anybody know this piece or Richard E. Rogers Jr.? And it was one of those rare occasions where I got nothing. I mean, usually you ask the percussion community for anything and someone knows, someone jumps in. So I was kind of confused, like, whoa, nobody seems to know this. And it's like, as far as I can tell, somewhat fallen into at least some obscurity. And I was very surprised there are actually no YouTube recordings of this. There's nothing about this person on PAS. And I kind of had a fun little week trying to figure out who this dude was and kind of what he's about. So it's published by Studio 4 Music, which is a common percussion music publisher. And you can still find the piece at Steve Weiss for $2. And it's also on Southern Percussion. Yeah, $2, Steve Weiss, which I've noticed probably means they haven't updated the price in a long time.
Oh my gosh.
You can also find it on Southern Percussion, which is a retailer Laurel and I deal a lot with because they carry our music. And it's for sale there for £3, so about the same.
Okay.
And so I thought it was really interesting that, this is a piece that I was assigned as an undergrad, and it's available at these major percussion retailers, yet I can't find anything about it, and I can't find anything about the composer, and no one on Facebook could tell me anything about it. So anyway, I went digging, and...
So before you tell us, I'm assuming it's no, but is he related to the other Richard Rodgers?
No, not that I could tell.
Okay.
Not that I found.
Yeah,
that is a good question. That is where I started, actually. Yeah, that's something I looked. So I found an obituary online, and of course I thought, 1982. It's a piece I played in college. I was in college from 2000 to 2004, so I would assume this composer is still alive. I find an obituary, and I can't quite confirm it's the right person. And this obituary is very sweet and well written, and I found it at a funeral home website. And it does say that he was a drummer, and that he made custom drums, and that he played with various DCA cores. And I thought, okay, that sure sounds like the guy, but I can't be certain. So lots of digging, frustration, can't find anything. A student of mine, Kaipo Lan, who's been on the show several times, he even went to our library here at JMU and asked them if they could point us to any resources to figure out who this guy is. And Laurel knows these people because we work with them, but Brian and Karen, Laurel, they had a field day just trying to figure out who he was. And I bumped into Karen in the faculty coffee area, and she was just like, who is that guy? I can't figure out who that guy is. It's driving me crazy. And she apparently looked really hard and couldn't find anything. So I made a break only when I found this obituary, and I scrolled down and started reading some of the comments that people had written, and they were like, hey, condolences, this was such a nice event, and we'll miss you, and just kind condolences. And one of them refers to him, several people in the comments refer to Richard as Ricky and Rick. So I keep seeing Ricky Rodgers, and then I Google Ricky Rodgers, and I started to find a lot more. So that was the big breakthrough. The publisher has it Richard E. Rodgers, but he went by Ricky. And apparently, let's see, what do we want to say now? Too many things open. So he served as a percussion judge for Drum Corps Associates, the DCA Corps. He was a judge for their contest from 1985 to 1999, judged regular season contests and championship finals. He's been associated with countless drum and bugle corps, including the Geneva Apple Knockers and the Watkins Glen Squires. I'm sorry, I've not heard of these groups, but I probably wouldn't have. Most recently, Rick had been with the Ghost Rider Mini Corps and the Rochester Crusader Drum and Bugle Corps, where he was drum instructor and percussion arranger. He had a second-degree black belt in Taekwondo and also enjoyed playing in his volleyball league. So as I Googled more about him, I only found anything about him from a chat page. There was a web forum that had all these people asking about a company called Stingray Percussion. And apparently he started a little drum manufacturing company called Stingray. And if you image search Stingray drums, you can find some. Every once in a while you can find a piece of a drum set or a piece of a marching equipment, a snare drum, tenor drum on eBay or something, but the company is totally gone. So there's this web forum and all these comments, people asking about Stingray Percussion, and someone said, oh, maybe Ricky knows. Anyway, I just went through page after page after that this person responding to these inquiries about Stingray Percussion Company was in fact Richard E. Rodgers Jr. And definitely true, definitely confirmed it. I can definitely tell you that's who he was, and that he started this company, and that the company was strong for a few years and then fell apart when his investors tried to, I guess, take it over and make the drums really cheap, and they didn't work, and the heads collapsed the shells, and it's actually really funny. All these people are complaining about it, and Richard is complaining along with them, like, oh yeah, the drums totally went to hell after my investors took over, and he kind of tells the whole story. So anyway, it was just kind of a touching experience to have this piece that I played as a student and that I don't see people playing anymore, I don't see on YouTube, And then to also have this composer who I couldn't find anything about, and then to kind of have to really literally dig and claw through like obscure web pages to find anything about him, and then find out that he has passed away, and that he was a really prominent figure in the DCA Corps. So last thing I guess I'll say about him is that he was inducted into what's called the World Drum Corps Hall of Fame in 2016, and they write about Rick Rogers of Oswego, New York. Not only was Rick Rogers, who passed away in 2010, a talented drummer, percussionist, instructor, arranger, administrator, and judge, he founded two well-known businesses serving the drum and bugle corps community, Stingray Percussion and Empire Percussion. By the way, Empire Percussion is equally obscure. I couldn't find much about them at all, and now this whole history just only exists in these couple of chat forums. He served as percussion judge for Drum Corps Associates, contests from 85 to 95, judging regular season contests and championship finals, and looks like, yeah, that bit I've already said. So anyway, it's was a cool discovery, and I thought it was worth sharing, sort of in that preservation of composers and percussionists who kind of missed the internet wave. So kind of hijacking from Ben's topic area.
Cool.
Yeah, that's interesting. I cannot believe that a piece of sheet music is still $2. That's incredible to me on Steve Weiss.
Yeah, you can also get the owl wood chimes at Steve Weiss still for, I think it's even less. I think it's like $1.50 or something. Like they have not updated their prices, and I think that's
the
so
what?
Fun.
Wow.
The owl wood chimes.
What are those?
Oh man, here, wait, let me make sure I got it right here. I might have said the wrong price. Maybe it's like $4 or something.
Yeah, I was unpacking a box the other day, and I found one of my Musser etudes, and it was $3.
Yeah, it's great. Yeah, Ben, owl wooden bamboo chimes, $1.95.
Huh.
Yeah, so it's kind of funny. I bought a few from them. They're small, but they sound good.
Cool.
Yeah. Well, that's crazy. And Casey, also, I think it's interesting in today's world with all of this technology, that it's so cool to listen to your adventure of this scavenger hunt trying to put together this guy's life. And I love moments like this because all the information is at our fingertips. We don't have to do that as much anymore. So it is kind of cool to discover these people that are on the periphery and to bring them back into our community. I think that it could be cool with the information that you found to write like a little memoriam of him or something, because PIS features a few people, I think 3 people actually, in every rhythm scene issue. They had been doing that. I'm not sure if they're doing it right now, but I'm sure they are actually. And I think that's a great way to get people back into our community, is to put something on the PIS website about them. So it could be cool to tip Rick Mattingly off about this guy, and or turn him onto him, and he might be able to write a little.
Well, and there's certainly people who know much more about him than I did, because you look at the correspondence on the little forum, and there's people who were definitely there and definitely knew him and worked with him, and then of course all the people that were writing condolences on the funeral home. So, so certainly there's much better information than what I got out there. But you're absolutely right. Like when I had to really hunt for it, it was so satisfying. Like when I finally put together the person who was responding on that forum was him, it was just really satisfying. Not that the information was like super golden or anything, but his name on the forum was something like drummer guy 2009 or something. It was like something like that. And so it didn't have his name, but then after looking at all the conversations, like, oh, that's definitely him. That's Ricky. That is Richard Rogers for sure. And you really get a sense of his personality with the way he's responding to these questions and this failed company, and just how he's like talking with this community. And it was like so much cooler than our usual smash and grab, get the information you need,
Yeah. That's awesome.
Yeah. Lauren, are you back?
I am.
Yay!
Cool.
Computer's not having it.
Cool. No problem. I'll just edit appropriately. But Lauren, do you have any? I know very little about DCA Core, and I don't know. Is that part of anything of what you do, or can you tell us anything about it? It's okay if not.
I used to work for a DCA corps when I first moved to Atlanta, called Atlanta CV. And at the time when I first started there, I was just out of my undergrad, and I instructed the front ensemble. Most of them were in their like late 40s and 50s, and were much, much older than me. So that was kind of a cool experience for me. But I think what I'm seeing across the board is that as the activities grow, and it's kind of, not to say in a negative way, but it feels, like in each tier that you get, it's like each group is moving at the same, I'm not explaining this very well. It's like taking like a kid and like a middle schooler and a high schooler. We're all moving at the same time, but just at different points, right? That's kind of how I see DCI and DCA. Like they're both moving towards the same thing. Just DCA tends to be like a few years behind. Like they allowed amplification ensembles back in 2012 through 2013. I think that was my first year teaching there, and that was the first year. Whereas in DCI, that was back I think in 2003, I believe. Megan, you might know. I don't know. Remember. But back then, and so it's just like at a different time they're doing the same things. So what I'm seeing now in DCA is that it's a lot more moved towards high school age kids and local kids that maybe want to do DCI eventually, versus what I think even when I was like a marching member, it used to be, guys and girls that had done it for years and years and years. And then once they aged out, they went and did DCI or DCA. So I think it's moving away from that a little bit and becoming more as like a training ground to go into DCI.
Sure.
I don't know if that's intentional or not, but that's just in watching what I saw at Atlanta Quest, or Atlanta CV, sorry. It was ran by a guy named Chris Romanowski, and within 5 years, it went from being predominantly, 54-year-old educators to now mostly high schoolers that have a desire to go on a DCI at some point, or maybe some of them stayed even. So I think it's all moving towards that, from what I can tell. But I'm not like heavily involved in that at all.
I thought it was just it's kind of seems like a neat thing. They're more acceptive of a broader age range. And it's probably safe to say they're generally more relaxed and less competitive than DCI, right? Well,
you would think that, but actually, I remember my experience at Atlanta CV. They were very competitively driven, and they wanted, that I found that they were just as driven to make good sounds and play clean, and achieve at a high level. It was just at a different point. You know what I mean? Like they didn't have as much time as you do in DCI. They don't meet every day for 12 hours a day. They would only meet on the weekends. And, going into it, I didn't know what to expect teaching, like a freshman in high school to somebody that, is a band director in their 50s. But I found that I didn't change a lot of what I did. I didn't, you have to tailor to who you're talking to and cater to the kid. But at the end of the day, it was all about playing with good sounds and playing clean. And that was what they cared about. And I think that was just as competitively driven, just at a different level. You know what I mean? Like they don't have the same kind of time, which can be, it could be said about anything. It's like it all comes down to how much time do you have to put into this. And with DCI, it's just like anomaly, kind of unique thing that you're never going to have that much time to prepare for anything in your entire life. Like I remember when I was preparing for my senior recital, one of my teachers, Christopher Dean, was like, you're used to having like 12 hours a day to devote to like 12 minutes of music, and that's not realistic, but so that inherently means you're going to get at probably the closest you to whatever perfect may mean to you, whereas in DCA they don't have that kind of time. It's more weekend warrior.
Very cool, very cool. Hey, well, let's move right along to what Megan has for us today.
Yeah, so today my topic is about diversifying the orchestra, and we've talked about this a few times on the podcast. And so I found a recent article that I thought was really interesting that I'd like to report on. The title is called "Are Orchestras Culturally Specific?" And the subtitle is, "A recent article suggests that orchestras are culturally specific to white people. Are they? 4 thought leaders discuss diversity, equity, and inclusion in orchestras and American society at large." And the article is written by a man named Jesse Rosen, is the president and CEO of the League of American Orchestras. So the article is sort of interview style with these 4 different thought leaders. And the reason why Jesse was inspired to write this article, I think, is because the last year he said that, this is a quote from him, "We intensified our engagement with some of the challenges around equity last year when we invited diversity and inclusion experts Justin Liang and Carol McCord to speak to about 100 orchestras, the CEOs of about 100 orchestras." And they also continued this conversation in another panel discussion at the League of American Orchestras National Conference in Detroit last year. So to continue the subject and the conversation on the subject, he asked 4 thought leaders several questions relating to this topic. And those 4 people were a conservatory dean. Well, actually, I'll just say their names. It was Gary Gensling, who's the executive director of the National Symphony Orchestra, Chris Jenkins, who's associate dean for academic support at Oberlin Conservatory, Alex Lang, who's principal clarinet of the Phoenix Symphony, and Cecilia Alusa Tribble, who's a community and organizational development coordinator for the Metro Nashville Arts Commission. So very kind of already diverse. They're all leaders, but they kind of work in diverse fields, but all related to classical music in some way. So something that Chris, let me see here. Okay, so the way I kind of wanted to approach this is I just made some quotes from all 4 of those that I thought were really, really interesting. So the first one is Chris Jenkins. And to remind you, Chris is the Associate Dean for Academic Support at Oberlin University. And he says, first of all, that most of the repertoire programmed in the concert hall with the symphony orchestra is composed by white men who are not living. And that's just the truth, that's the way it is right now. He also says there have been efforts to diversify that repertoire, but these more diverse composers are kept in a box for special occasions. Every orchestra is going to have an event for Black History Month or for Martin Luther King Day, but that doesn't signal true diversity. He says that true diversity has to do with expanding the range of repertoire, thinking more carefully about programming works of composers of color all the time. So he was also said that he likes to joke that as a classical musician, he won't lose his union card for not liking Monteverdi. And that's okay. We cannot like Monteverdi, and people are okay with that, right? And maybe that wasn't acceptable a couple hundred years ago, but now it is. And we can still be accepted as real musicians if we say, I don't like Monteverdi. However, what will this field look like in 50 to 100 years? Is it okay to say that we don't like Beethoven? So he poses the question, what will the field look like? Can someone who says that they like Julius Eastman and William Grant Still and David Baker, but that they don't like Beethoven, is that okay? So what can be the paradigm of a classical music fan? And he says that that is what true diversity looks like. So he also says, I'm not advocating losing Beethoven. That would be terrible. But what I'm saying is that if we relinquish control of this art form to other people, to people who aren't white, and let them drive where it goes in the future, that might happen. Real diversification requires that you be okay with that possibility. And that quote is interesting to me because I do think that people who say who have the argument, well, classical music is this canon of white male composers who now are dead. And that's what it is. I think that's totally wrong because there are a whole diverse pool of people writing classical music, and it is our job now and the job of these leaders that are being surveyed here to go out and find those people and to give people the tools to write music and to encourage people to be a part of this field and invite people to be a part of this field, because history is not inviting females and non-white people to be a part of the field, right? So we have to invite them now, I think. Another person, Gary Gensling, to remind you, Gary is the executive director of the National Symphony Orchestra. He says, when orchestras talk about diversity, one of the first things they point to is the fact that they do an MLK or a Black History Month concert. I always get uncomfortable with that because it feels like it's reinforcing the notion that you can do one thing, check a box, and move on. And so Chris kind of said the same thing. It's like, Black History Month. We celebrate the music of Black composers. Yeah, but what about the rest of the year? You know, so it's not about checking a box. It's about this music becoming, and diversity becoming a permanent part of the canon. Gary also says, why can't we imagine a world where there's a diverse audience who appreciates all music? Let's not label what music is based on the color of the skin of the composer. Let's label it as great music or not great music. I love that quote. How do we get to that place where a broader audience can appreciate the music that we play and have played for years, and that music that music should be playing that we don't play? I think that that's great, because it's not. It is about diversifying the canon, but also it's just about great music, period. And Alex kind of clarifies that. Alex Liang, who, to remind you, is the principal clarinet of the Phoenix Symphony, who says diversity itself is not enough. The end game is not just having more Black or brown people on stage, although that certainly has an impact, and that's a meaningful impact, but on its own, it won't change the direction and priorities of organizations, because musicians are seen as the hands of the organization and others are seen as the brains. We should have a structure that supports a workforce of artists.
Wow.
Yeah, and there's one more person I would like to quote here, and that is Cecilia. She, again, is the Community and Organizational Development Coordinator for the Metro Nashville Arts Commission. And one of her quotes is, what do equity and inclusion look like at every level of your organization? From the bottom up, who has the power in your organization? What does your board look like? Your budget says a lot about your value system. Do you allocate funds towards certain programs so that your organization can shift itself towards a more equitable and inclusion mission and vision? And I think these are all really great questions that every organization should be asking. And we see a lot of them asking it, for sure. I think diversity, we can see a push towards this in a lot of arts organizations, but is everyone doing it? And there's a person in the new music community that we unfortunately lost this week, Matt Marks, who's a composer and a performer. And I wanted to mention him, especially on this topic, because Matt posted something on he was a big Twitter presence. I'm not on Twitter, so I don't really know about it, but I've heard he's a huge Twitter presence. But he is on Facebook. He posted something a few months ago that said, he said, I have this plan to publicly shame and I guess basically publicly shame and boycott any major symphony orchestra or just any orchestra who does not have at least one female composer on their season, which is great. If orchestras are not thinking about this by now, come on, get with the program. And so Matt has done such a great job of just pointing out those, or not necessarily pointing out those orchestras, but making people think about it. And I think, I go back and look at my percussion ensemble programs, and sometimes I don't have diverse programs. And there's a lot of things to think about. And it helps me when people like Matt remind me, yes, you have to consider all these things. And just because you're thinking about the logistics of the program and the personnel and the educational value to your students, you also have to think about making a diverse program. And I don't always do that. And so I really appreciate people like Matt Marks, and Amy Garapix does that all the time to me as well. And I appreciate their reminders and people like that who are really making it a point to step up. So Matt passed away, unfortunately, much too young, in the middle of his career this past week. And so I just wanted to, as a little tribute to him, just tell you all a little bit about him, because he's not in our percussion world per se. He's a French horn player and a composer. But on his website, he says that he's a composer of darkly comic opera theater works and instrumental electronic music that experiments with narrative and pop idioms. He was a founding member of Alarmal Sound, and with Alarmal Sound, he plays as a French hornist, also a vocalist and a keyboardist. So very diverse musician. And he also co-founded the New Music Gathering, which Laurel has reported on before, and she attended last year. So he, as a composer and arranger, he has been, New York Times says that his work is staggeringly creative, obsessively detailed by New York Magazine, and the LA Times writes that there's no fighting this music. His works have been presented at Carnegie Hall, Walt Disney Concert Hall, Lincoln Center, and the Barbican Center Bang on a Can Marathon, 21st Century Linderben, and live on WNYC Radio. So very widespread. He's had commissions from the LA Philharmonic, Brooklyn Philharmonic, Alarmo Sound, Here Arts Center, Bushwick Star, Hotel Elefant, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. He has written 2 operas. The first one was a post-Christian pop opera called The Little Death. And his most recent one was called Mata Hari for the Prototype Festival. And he just this week won an NEA grant to have it performed on the West Coast. Oh, so, yeah, if you are all on social media, as I know you all are, you've probably seen all of these tribute posts and pictures and videos and audio clips of his music, but he was a huge online presence and a huge name in the music scene, and just someone who was constantly creating and collaborating and fighting. You know, he was really an activist in the scene, so he will be sorely missed. And that's Matt Marks. So
wow,
yeah.
Wow, thanks so much, Megan. I have a question for you about the diversity. Do you think some orchestras that are, because we talk so much about wavering funding and ones that are just barely keeping alive, and we talk about orchestras going on strike and all these things, do you think programming, it's not a problem of it being a diverse or different composer, it's just a problem of like introducing new music is so hard. Mm-hmm. Like people advocate for new music too. They say like, why aren't we playing more living composers, diversity aside? And we hear why that is hard. Do you think that is part of the problem? Is that they know, well, if I don't program this Beethoven, this Mozart, and I don't have those things in my cycle, my donors are not going to stay on board, or I don't know. It also brings to mind, we talked about a prominent percussionist who got dropped from Innovative Percussion some episodes ago. And one of our conclusions was that, you know, hey, this probably is going to cost Innovative some money, but this is how they're choosing to spend their money. Mm-hmm. You know, so maybe the orchestras that are more well off and aren't wavering and aren't right on the edge of collapse, they should really be doing this more, and they should be pushing for diverse composers.
Yeah,
I don't know.
I think you're right. I think that you know, it in a lot of ways it comes from the top down, and it comes from the orchestras that are extremely visible and doing well to be a leader in this change. And I think, you know, grant organizations also are a leader by saying, look, we want to fund grant proposals that promote diversity, equity, and inclusion. And I think that's helping already. But yeah, I think it would be really helpful for the big orchestras to be doing this, and some of them are for sure. And yeah. I think it's definitely possible. There's a lot of concerts in a season, and it's definitely possible to keep those staples of the classical Western art tradition of, you know, Rachmaninoff and Beethoven and Mozart, but around that to program things that haven't been heard before and to feature composers who haven't been heard before. And yeah, that's how they're going to enter the canon also, is if we play their music.
Yeah.
Well, and you know, I didn't know Matt personally, but something that I've found incredibly inspiring is how the new music community, you know, made of people just like us, has kind of rallied around his fiance.
Yeah.
He was engaged to be married, and someone set up one of those funding campaigns just to help with like whatever might come her way in the next couple of months. And, you know, there was a goal, and the last time I looked at it, it had raised over 5 times more than the goal that the person set. Which was just really cool. And to get to the topic of, you know, diversity in the orchestra and should the big ones do this, I had such a cool experience when I was in Chicago, I guess last week or the week before. My chamber partner, Mary Ann, has this entire solo piano program of music by Haitian composers. That's just kind of recently been discovered and edited. out of the Center for Haitian Music that's in Montreal, and that's not the actual name of it, and I can't remember the correct name, but these manuscripts are stored in Montreal now.
Okay.
And she was presenting a solo recital at Symphony Hall in Chicago as part of the CSO's African American Network, which I'd never heard of before, but I thought, this is cool. They've got this kind of initiative, and it was really neat to walk into the recital salon, and, you know, the audience was really like just half and half people of color, and then those that you would expect to see, like the rich white ladies.
Yeah.
You know, which
Hate them.
just like reality, that's who you see a lot of the time.
Right.
But it was so cool. It was sold out, so you were just packed in like sardines, but listening to everyone around me speak, like everyone was just equally excited
That's
to
awesome.
hear it. And it was so cool. And of course there were members from like the consulate and people who were from Haiti originally were at the recital, and evidently Chicago was founded by a gentleman from Haiti. Yeah, so all these things that I didn't know, but the music itself, and this goes back to one of the favorite quotes you mentioned, which was the guy that said, no, it's just about good music or not.
Yeah.
That's it.
Yeah.
You know, the pieces that Marianne played were so interesting to me because you could hear the ragtime, you could hear the like Latin dance in it. You could also hear the Chopin because Haiti was originally a French colony. And it was such interesting music. And then you could also hear the really like folkloric influences with lots of different modes and things. It was just, I mean, it was frankly really cool. And it was like, wait, what style is this? I don't even know, because it was kind of its own amalgamation of all of those different things. And I think it's so cool that Marianne's doing that, but she got a grant to record it. So she'll have the first recordings of those, and hopefully they'll like just start to get around. But I think it's cool. And that project wasn't originally with CSO. It was with a different group in the city whose specific mission is to bring music of other people there. It's called Crossing Borders. And yes, it was cool that it got picked up by the African American Network. But so it does work, and maybe it's just taking forever. But
yeah,
it's really nice to experience.
Well, thanks. Yeah, thanks so much, Laurel and Megan. We're running short on time here, so we've got a Facebook question from. Oh, by the way, Lauren got lots of Facebook comments, but they were mostly about. And I guess I'll just ask. So, Lauren, someone asked, like, is this going to finally be the year that you get a dog? What's that about? Have you been trying to get a dog for some time, but you're too busy?
Yeah, I talk about it a lot. But I think I'm going on like 2 years saying, you know, next month I'm going to get a dog. It's just, I just drive too much right now. But at one point,
So I'm going to make a way controversial, bold, declarative statement that Laurel and I's kid is easier, I believe, is less maintenance than most dogs I've seen.
I really hope you don't jinx yourself by saying that.
No, I'm sure it won't always be that way. I'm sure it won't always, but I'm just saying, like, 0 to 4 months, I've seen dogs that are more difficult.
Wow.
Definitely.
I mean, I'm impressed with, they've been sleeping this entire time, totally peaceful.
Right. 6-hour car ride, nothing. Followed by a 4-hour car ride, nothing. Yeah, totally.
Yeah. You know, there's something about coming home and a dog just being so happy to see, like someone being so happy that you're just there. Like, yeah. But, one day I'll have a dog and maybe it'll behave. But,
And is excited to see.
yes, as excited that I'm coming home and not just like, hey, let me go back to my video game or whatever it is I'm doing. Yeah. So that's what that's about. They're just
Okay. Well, to the real Facebook question, which is sort of in the same neighborhood as what Megan was talking about, but more on the gender side of things. A friend of the podcast and former guest Brandon Arvay asks, our percussion community is male dominated. What are some things that you experienced / felt, saw, thought that encourage you to do what you do?
Yeah, I had saw he post that and kind of thought about that prior to the call. I was thinking about it. I started watching. My dad was a drummer, a player, right? And so growing up at the age of like 2 and 3, I would go with him to watch drum lines play. I'd watch him play drum set, and I was seeing that at a very young age. And at that age, you're not aware yet of like, oh, it's only boys, it's only girls. When you're 2 and 3, you're not thinking that way. It's not until you're maybe 4 or 5 that you start to realize that. I think, from what I can remember, I had no thoughts about that. It was just, oh, that's cool. I like that, And I think that we pick those things up when we start to become aware because of we learn that from the people around us, right? And it's kind of what Megan was talking about. The people in power, so to say, or the people that are teachers, kind of show us that in a subconscious way. So I think that I was lucky that I was surrounded by my dad, number one, being very encouraging from literally when I was old enough to hold sticks, I had sticks in my hand. And then as I got older, having teachers that were very encouraging to me. And that was the thing. So it started with a pure, I think this is cool, I'm into this, and I had a passion for it. And then I had teachers encouraging me to follow it and go for it. And I think that's the important thing to really open this world up to more diverse things. To go with Megan's saying, is having those people encouraging you to, number one, to speak up and to go after what you want to go after. I can look at specific points in my life as a percussionist where I felt nervous about something, or maybe not good enough, or maybe, like, well, I'm not sure if I know how to do that. But I would have someone there that would kind of be like, you should go for this. And I kind of have learned over the past few years that when I have that nervousness and that apprehension, that's a good thing. That means I'm about to grow. Either I'm going to fail and I'm going to learn something from that, or I'm going to succeed and learn and grow with that. And it's because I had those teachers there at those pivotal points telling me to go for it, And I think that, in saying that, it's important for whether it's the donors of a symphony or it's a teacher looking at kids, to encourage all kids, regardless of race or sex, to go after what they want to do. On the flip side, I can remember being in 8th grade and really wanting to be on the stair line in high school, right? But I felt like I was not good enough, and I knew I was good at mallets, and so I stuck with that. And I wish there had been someone there to pull that out of me. And so I try to be conscious of that as a teacher now. I've got a student right now that she's totally dedicated. She shows up at the high school at 7 a.m., an hour before school starts, to come play with me every day. That girl's there. She is doing everything she can to get better because she wants to major in music, and she's a transfer student. And I looked at her one day and said, well, have you thought about applying for section leader? Well, I think you're a natural fit. You're totally passionate and dedicated to this. And she goes, I never thought that I would be good enough for that. And she applied, and now I think she's going to be the section leader. And it just takes somebody in a more prominent position, or either a teacher or donors or whoever, to take that responsibility to encourage those that are not in that position to do that. And I think that's what it's going to take to see more diversity in this art form, is that teachers need to take responsibility for that. I'm going to encourage all my kids to do this and not just take them at face value. And on another note, I just did like one of the 6th grade tryouts where the kids come in and they try all the instruments, right? And I think it was very purposeful that they had me do it as a female to show that. And you should have seen the line of like 200 kids, and about half of them were girls. Right? Like, it was awesome. And I think that it's important if a kid comes up and maybe naturally they don't have like that inherent ability, but they have the passion, to not take the easy road and turn them away because they don't naturally have that skill, but to encourage them if they've got the passion, within reason, right? You shouldn't, tell every kid they should do it, but I think it's our jobs as teachers to sense that and sniff that out and really cultivate that and encourage it so much more beyond just showing them how to play. And that's going to come from, like Megan and Laurel said, it has to come from the top. It has to come from those people that are making those decisions, encouraging other people. And I think that's something everyone can do. Everyone can be involved in that. And I think that would make such a big difference. But to answer Brandon's question, yeah, I had the right people at the right time encouraging me to take the next step, so that even when I was nervous or maybe unconfident, I knew I had someone backing me up and that gave me the push to do the next step, you know.
Cool.
So that was
That's awesome.
yeah.
Well, very cool. I'm sure we could talk a whole lot more on this, but I think that what you just said is a really cool way to end the episode. So, yeah, Lauren Teel, great to meet you, and thanks for joining us today.
Well, thank you for having me. It was a cool conversation. I enjoyed it.
Good. All right, well, Laurel and Megan and Ben, thanks so much. We'll catch you guys at 1:46. We're almost at 1:50, you guys.
Wow. It's crazy.
It's crazy. See you guys later.
All right. Bye.